Okay, it's hard for me to read this story and not think about self-storage, so I did a little looking into it and a little thinking about it. I came across some statistics, a statistic, that there is over 2 billion square feet of self-storage in the United States alone. Over 2 billion square feet. Now that probably doesn't surprise us, because if you go for a ride down most roads within a short amount of time, you'll notice, oh look, there's a self-storage unit. And then you drive a little further and go in a different area maybe, and you say, oh look, there's another self-storage unit. And then you find another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. We tend to pile up the stuff. It happens for a lot of different reasons, and it is a result of the abundance of our life. In North America, in the United States especially, we have an abundance. We use disproportionately than the whole rest of the world resources and wealth and stuff. Lots and lots of stuff. And that's no surprise to us. I mean, after all, it is rummage season, and that's the condition of the bottom of the steps as of 8:30 last night. It's now got more stuff in it, by the way. I saw it going down this morning. And the whole basement is filled with stuff, all kinds of stuff. Stuff that we've accumulated over the course of our lives, and people in Maplewood and South Orange have accumulated over the course of their lives. It happens that we donate it for a lot of different reasons, some of them very positive in our lives, some of them maybe not so positive. I mean, we have children, or many of us have children, and we buy stuff. Toys and cribs and walkers and car seats. And then life changes. And the toys that we had for our toddlers and our preschoolers don't work for our elementaries and our middle schoolers, and so we decide, because of that shift in the chapter of our lives, maybe it's time to donate those things, or maybe we have too many toys to fit in all of the bins that we have, as Rita was suggesting, or changes happen and the things we have are no longer current. I mean, I don't know, have we had a Pong donated lately? You remember that game, or Atari, or the first Nintendos? All of those kind of collector's items, they get donated, and so do things like VCRs, and now even DVDs and DVD players. Things change in our lives. Technology moves on, and we have this stuff, and we donate it to Rummage, or to someplace. Our lives change, and the 4-bedroom house is no longer the house we need, and we're moving into that 2-bedroom condo, and we start cleaning out. And we sort it into things we can give to Rummage, and things we're not ready to give up yet, and things that'll fit into the 2-bedroom condo. And we give these things to Rummage. We lay these things out in our condo, and we rent a self-storage unit. Isn't that what we do? We rent a self-storage unit. We rent a self-storage unit because there's not a place to store the Christmas decorations and that Christmas tree we love so much. And there's not a place to store all of the things that have deep emotional connections for us. And there's not a place to store some of the other things that we had in storage for so long in our basements that we no longer own. And so we rent a self-storage unit. And I get the self-storage units, they're great, and they serve a real purpose, because there are folks who have made those kind of changes or live in places where square footage is at a premium in an apartment. I saw an ad in New York City one time about just that, and about how people live in an apartment the size of a thimble and have to find a place for storage, and it was an ad for self-storage. They serve a purpose in those cases, and they serve a purpose for people whose lives are changing, and yet there are things they still want to hold on to and pass on to others, and maybe aren't quite ready to pass it on. Or they serve a purpose with college students who don't want to haul all that stuff back and forth every single year, so they haul it out to a self-storage unit. Now, all of that has led to another phenomenon, and I would have never found this on my own. Someone introduced me to the television show Storage Wars. Have you ever seen this show? It's an A&E show. And in this show, that's where I got the 2 billion square feet number, by the way. I watched the very first show. In this show, what the premise of the show is, there are people who go and buy abandoned self-storage units. If you are more than 3 months behind on your rent for a self-storage unit, they will sell it. And there are these auctioneers who auction off all of these self-storage units, and the numbers are astounding to me. If there's 2 billion square feet of it, they've made a whole reality show, 9 seasons worth, 191 episodes worth of Storage Wars. And they follow 4 characters who are buyers. There is Jared, who is the new young gun. He's been doing it for 2 years, and he's willing to buy stuff sometimes that the others just shake their head about and say, no, no, no. He takes risks, and then he goes home and has to talk to his partner, his wife, about what he bought. And you watch all of that. And there is David, and David is kind of he's an operator in the whole thing. And there is Daryl, who calls himself a lifetime collector who is addicted to all of these things. And there is Barry, who is the gambler, the new guy. And they all drive up in either great big pickup trucks or great big cars. I don't know why, but I noticed that in all of the vehicles. And they show up at one facility, and they spend the whole day at an auction. One facility. Think about how many facilities you see driving from here to the Delaware River. Or from here to NJ-PAC. There's a lot of them. One facility, and the rules are simple. There's more than 3 months of deficiency on the unit. They're going to cut the lock off the unit, and when they do, all of the buyers have 5 minutes to look in. That's Daryl looking in. You're not allowed to go inside the unit. You're not allowed to reach inside the unit and open anything. You can only look from there. Then they close the door and they sell the unit. And it's an auction. And one of the guys says, it's a cash auction. One of the guys says he brings $10,000 for a day's worth of auctions. And in the shows that I've watched, the units go from anywhere a couple $100 to a couple $1,000. And you watch what happens. And they buy unit after unit after unit. And they make a living doing this. Rummage volunteers don't get any ideas. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea. They buy, and they have to haul it out of there immediately. And they haul it back to their stores because they have these businesses, whether it's warehouses or secondhand shops or antique stores, and they dig through all of it to see what they can find. And they're looking for gold. In the one show I was watching, there were some parts of an organ, and they were hoping it was a Hammond B3, because that would really bring some money. Do you know how big a Hammond B3 is? There's the organ console, and then there's the great big speaker. and the keyboard and the bench. They dig through it. They find cash sometimes, and sometimes they find treasures. Sometimes they do. That's a treasure. I know, I'll explain. Darrell has been a lifelong collector, and he took them back to his house in the first show to show them the kinds of things that he has gotten at buying up storage units. He has a 17th century brass planter and stand worth about $5,000. He'll sell it to you if you want it. These are pen and ink Picasso sketches left in a storage unit. On the show I watched, Jared, the young gun, bought a car covered in dust. $400. And it ran. And he got a couple thousand, several thousand for it. I think it was a Honda Accord, actually. We have all kinds of stuff. And what a show like that suggests to me is that it's true what Jesus says. We can't take it with us. And in fact, it sometimes even gets abandoned and left behind, and maybe we rented a unit and no one in our family ever knew it, and so it gets sold to auction to someone who has absolutely no connection to all the stuff that we carefully laid in that place. When Jesus was addressed by a man who said, "Tell my brother to give me my share of the inheritance," Jesus told the story that Rita talked about. The story of a man who had a bumper crop, and so he put up more barns to store all of his stuff and thought he had it made. And he finishes the story by suggesting to us that if we're going to be rich, perhaps we should be rich toward God. Perhaps we should be rich toward God. We live in a society that is abundant, has lots of stuff, and is broken and divided and uneasy and filled with injustices and prejudices and struggles. And what Jesus suggests is that's where we ought to be putting our time and effort and energy and investment, to be rich toward God. We all know people who once had a great job that was well-paying. Maybe they lost the job. Maybe they decided the job didn't have any meaning, and they shifted where they invested of themselves. Maybe they started working in a hunger program. This is a picture at Newark Penn Station of our feeding program. Maybe they volunteered their time for Habitat for Humanity. I know a man, I don't know him really, of a man who once had a very high-level job for a very large building company, building houses. And he was at a very high level. And it just didn't feel right. And so he left the company and became an executive director for a chapter of Habitat for Humanity. Doesn't make near what he used to make, but he's rich toward God and rich toward others. I know folks who that's how they choose to spend their retirement or a shift in life. I know a fellow who was a very high-level investment banker who walked away from all of it, went back to seminary and became a minister and served smaller churches. Because he can. Not that they could really afford him if he went to work for them full-time. So he works for them part-time. I know a number of stories like that. That fellow who came to Jesus and said, "Tell my brother to give me my share of the inheritance." Jesus was subtle, wasn't he? It's a slight misdirection. He tells him a story about all of these things as if to say, isn't the relationship with your brother more important than all the stuff and the battle over the inheritance? I think that's the invitation of the text. We're fortunate to live in a place and a time when most of us, not all of us, but most of us are pretty comfortable. And we have an opportunity to invest in richness toward God and toward others, even with our comfort. Let us pray. Our loving and gracious God, you are the source of our life and our love. You are the source of all that we need. Lead us and guide us and encourage us to be faithful servants who are rich towards you and others. Amen.